Welcome to our 10th Quantum Pulse session. This is a monthly session where we share information, we do a discussion, and we enable analysis on topics that are relevant for quantum science, quantum technology, policy, ecosystems, both in India and at the global level. So in this 10th QETCI Quantum Pulse session, our topic is quantum supply chain, where innovation meets advantage. So let's decipher that, break that down during our session today. And we will, of course, talk about quantum supply chains, that's there in the topic, but we will also address the very important topic of what technological sovereignty means, especially in the context of quantum. I would like to welcome our wonderful panelists for today's session. We have with us today Professor Jessica Wade, a researcher at Imperial College London, UK. She is also plays a very prominent role in the quantum ecosystem in UK, and we'll hear her talk about it in a bit. Lakshya Priyadarshi, who's the CTO for QPI AI, which is a quantum computing startup from Bangalore, India, and Jayam Sonani, who's the founder and CEO of Diamond Elements, based out of Surat, India. I'm going to start the session in typical Quantum Pulse style by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves in a little bit more detail while providing context to the work that they are doing. So over to you, Professor Jessica.
Thanks so much, Reena, and thank you for everyone for joining, and thanks for the upgrade to Professor. I'm just a lecturer, but I'll take it. I'm also very thrilled. I just got back from Mumbai. So I've just been in Mumbai for a few days attending NASSCOM, the conference. And also I got to visit IIT Bombay, which is absolutely amazing university. And it's kind of the Indian equivalent of Imperial, which is the university I work at. So it's kind of got that science and tech focus that IIT Bombay has. Nowhere near as beautiful a campus in the UK as IIT Bombay, but we try. So I work on kind of new materials for emerging technologies, a particular focus lately on materials for quantum sensing. As Reena mentioned, I'm also co-director of our quantum center at Imperial, which has many ambitions, a lot around research, as you can imagine, and trying to get quantum technologies to end users so that they benefit society and the economy, but also around kind of training and upskilling the next generation of quantum scientists and engineers, supporting policymakers in understanding quantum, and trying to get a better understanding of the quantum ecosystem and barriers to commercialization. One of the big challenges in the UK that we face, and we can get to this in the discussion, is around investment. And although investors are willing to invest to a certain extent, the money needed to grow quantum companies is quite huge, and you need long-term and sustained support. So often we have fantastic companies that start in the UK and go overseas because they get more opportunity. So skills, infrastructure, investment, and kind of how we get quantum technologies to be useful are all things I really care about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lakshya.
Hello, hi all. This is Lakshya, VP of Quantum Platforms and Solutions at QPI AI. And I've been working in the domain for last 8 years now. Primarily, I work on development of quantum algorithms for applications of practical relevance and of commercial interest, with focus on fault-tolerant quantum computing in the future. At QPI, I have been working on systems that are instrumental in bringing our quantum computing to the cloud, as well as leading the education vertical here, where we have a community of around 24,000 people from various domains of interest, and also participating in how we can democratize this technology from an education as well as a commercial and professional standpoint. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshya. Over to you, Jayam.
Yeah, so I am James Sonani. I am the founder of Diamond Elements, and we have been working on growing diamond for various applications, including quantum materials. So, and our target is to work on new ways of developing diamond with different concentration of NVs for different sensors, detectors, lasers, a lot of different applications. And we have been trying to work on the supply chain and production of this. Yeah, thank you.
So with this, the topic says supply chains, and supply chains are really important, and so they are true for quantum. But when we talk about tech sovereignty, right, and then what does tech sovereignty actually mean? I've been having a conversation on different platforms on this. I'm part of the World Economic Forum, and when we talk about next generation computing, the topic of tech sovereignty comes up. It has also come up in many other international forums. And I'm going to, open this up to our panelists to say, what do you think about what this means and what is the significance in the context of supply chains for quantum? Professor Wade, okay, Jessica, would you want to go forward?
I can try. I mean, I suppose in the context of technology, sovereignty means something about a nation being able to independently control whatever that technology is. So in the case of quantum, countries, governments want to have control over their own quantum computing systems, their own quantum encryption and communication systems, potentially some of their quantum sensors, especially if they have military or defense implications. So things like navigation. Governments want to be the ones that are in charge or have control over those companies, especially when they're deployed within that nation. For everyone listening, and obviously everyone on this panel, it gets extraordinarily complicated because of how diverse the supply chains and funding mechanisms are for quantum companies. So if you imagine a quantum sensing system for navigation or a quantum computing system, all of the companies that are building those will have to buy a huge number of components, often from a big global marketplace. Then they'll have to find investment because, as I mentioned in the start, these are very big ticket, they're expensive things to develop. Often they'll have to go overseas for that investment, especially if they want to one day sell into those markets. So I can speak again for the UK, tiny, tiny country. I mean, minuscule compared to India. If you want to make any money out of your quantum company, you're going to have to try and grow in markets outside the UK, which means you probably want to take investment from there. So your supply chain isn't sovereign. Your investment landscape is probably not sovereign. And then when you think about the skills needed to make these companies and these technologies possible, often you have to import that talent too. India is obviously immensely, immensely privileged to be home to so many remarkable physicists and engineers and people who really want to work hard on building these technologies. Not all countries have that. In the UK, we have a huge shortage of kind of qualified quantum engineers and researchers. So there's a kind of sovereignty issue there as well, in that if you're importing all of your components, if you're importing all of your money and you're importing all of your talent, where does that kind of sovereignty come in? There was, in a couple of governments ago under Rishi Sunak, there was a really clear science and technology framework that outlined what we should own, collaborate, and access. So what technologies or what part of a supply chain or a technology creation should we be owning? What part should we collaborate on? And that means defining your kind of trusted friends around the world. And what should we just be accessing? And I've not seen that broken down granularly for quantum yet, but I think it would be really useful for everyone trying to work out what it is sovereignty means. So the short answer is it's some way that governments want to try and kind of bolster or strengthen their ability to protect and advance those particular technologies. You can see why countries might want to do it. But from a practical perspective, especially when you've got technologies as complex as quantum, it's really hard.
True. I think I really like that own, collaborate, and access, right? I think that's sort of, and then I also think of the term that was brought in by somebody else I was talking to, is the term agency. Is, instead of just control, you say, do have agency over what you want to do with that technology, right? And at any point in time, if that agency gets questioned, then sovereignty gets questioned. But I think that own, collaborate, and I think that's great. What was the third point? Own, collaborate, or access. Okay, that's wonderful. Over to you, Lakshya. When you think of what your company is doing, and when you view the supply chain for computing, what does sovereignty look like, and what are you looking at it? As a company, what's the approach that you are taking?
Yeah, Reena. So certainly As Jess has mentioned, quantum has a globally distributed supply chain, and there are models of owning and accessing and collaborating. I would like to build the fourth pillar to it, which is build. Right, so we build the technologies, and we are building quantum computers and the quantum systems that can enable a full stack technology which is vertically integrated. So build is as important as all the other three, where new forms of technologies can be created. From what we look at, the strongest advantage that we see is the advantage of talent in the country, and that would help us continue building this next generation technologies as our roadmap. So we have a 25 qubit system as of today, and recently we announced a 64 qubit system as well, which would be operational and available by end of this year. Right. So we are focusing on building this technology and also ensuring that these systems are accessible, across various kind of domains and verticals. And from the sovereignty standpoint, standardization also comes into picture, because the technology and its emerging nature. We are also looking towards building a unified model of access and model of data, as well as architectural standardization that can really weave in different types of modalities or technologies, and for the end users it becomes easy. We have seen a lot of support from the National Quantum Mission to ensure that the sovereignty component is really pumped up, and groups within the country can develop as well as distribute and make this technology accessible to scientists and engineers and businesses. So I believe that building is core, and at our part, we are building not only the technology but also the systems and the ecosystem around it, which will ultimately use the tech and build over the tech for meaningful applications.
So you are building the computer, but
Right.
what about I mean, I'm sure for the components that go into make that computer, you are right now dependent on suppliers from different parts of the world. What is your thought process on the supply chain part of it?
Certainly, the supply chain for the quantum computing systems are distributed, and we depend on them. But over a long term, we do see that majority of these efforts would be focused towards indigenization and having kind of a development ecosystem which can then internalize the supply chain. Of course, we'll continue to have as technology evolves, we'll continue to have the diversity. But as far as the mandate of the national mission is, and how we are also proceeding ahead on that, we'll see a lot of indigenization happening in the future.
Okay, great. Jayam, over to you. I think if we look at diamond elements, it sits in a very different part of the supply chain. I think
Yes.
quite opposite of where QPA AI is sitting, right? You sort of become the supplier to a lot of people. So
Right.
what does supply chain and, sovereignty look like from that end of the supply chain? What are your
Actually,
thoughts?
so my thought being working on developing the quantum materials. So I have been trying to make control the supply
So,
chain from
Jayam,
the
can
start.
you speak a bit louder, just a little
Okay.
bit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my target was to, once we started this company, when we start developing something, we try to make things from the beginning. So we want to make sure that we are independent in terms of developing the technology, the material, and move forward that. So we have been developing the plasma reactors in which we can grow the quantum materials. We control the technology to develop that kind of reactor development, so that we are continuously improving the system to develop new type of quantum materials, whether it's ultra high purity diamonds, whether it's isotopically engineered materials, which is important for certain quantum application. So, and we are building a characterization lab itself, which is the after once the material is developed, we have to make sure that how to standardize the parameters, the report for those kind of materials. And we are building our own quantum characterization lab, which will make sure that the material we are producing is something has standard requirement for different labs and different researchers around the world. So we have been already working on trying to be managing the supply chain up to material development. Next step will be to go to a fabrication facility, which we will do pre-fabrication on the materials with up to certain level of making the NVs in particular patterns in particular requirement, whether it's a single NV or a high doped NV, like those kind of things. So we have been trying to make it a quite a, we are already working on towards the sovereignty of this technology and trying to manage as much as possible in our company we can do. Yes. So yeah, that's it from our side.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I'm reminded of is that your company started doing this, was not very actively engaged in the quantum ecosystem, and you were doing your own thing. And when we discovered diamond elements actually as QETCI, we figured out that they were actually supplying diamonds all over the world, but were not supplying to anybody in India. So it was a very interesting discovery and connecting them to the quantum ecosystem.
Actually,
And
yes.
of course, there was a lot of, I don't think anybody has been questioned as much as Jayam was questioned on the capability, because we couldn't believe that there was, and not just me, when we took it to the government departments, nobody could believe that there was this company sitting in Surat who had this capability, and they were doing this work. So a lot of questions which got answered. And I think the anecdote that I remember the best was that we had gone for a visit to Imperial College with some of the Indian companies, and there was a lab. And you can tell whose lab it was. I think Jessica knows, and Jayam would know.
It's
And
Neil
they will,
Alford,
yes,
Dr. Neil Alford, yeah.
yes.
And
Do you want to tell the rest of the story?
so at that time when we were just talking, and I came to know that he was, I never knew about him in person, but when we were discussing that I'm working on production of diamond materials for different application, he was quite happy that there was someone who is actually making, except one company who has the limitation to certain development of the material like element 6. They were not able to develop a full customization solution as per the requirement what such researchers are working. So, and we immediately got started discussing about the requirements, and we I could understand all his requirement very well, and we immediately started supplying those things. Just yesterday only, he has sent me a new request for a new type of diamond materials, which is for masers and like this. So we have been working with similar application in different parts of Australia, group in US, who are working on such high NV concentration for maser application, and they are quite happy with the material which we are
Right,
producing,
right.
and they are quite happy with how much customizations we can do, which no one was able to do till now.
So I guess what I was trying to drive at is, and that brings us to the next question, which I'll address to all my panelists. But I think what this brings us to the perspective is that the moment you have alternatives, in this case, you happen to be the alternative for element six, because otherwise there was only one company which was, providing all the raw material on diamonds worldwide. So I think sovereignty, not just for us, but for anybody, is about having alternatives, right? So
Right.
how important is collaboration in that context, right? I mean, you just pointed that out. So I'm going to now ask Lakshya to talk about the role of collaboration in this whole process of sovereignty and having agency on what you want to do.
I believe that collaboration is of utmost importance because that is what leads to novelties and innovations in the technology. Also, diversification beyond a certain well set method that can lead to breakthroughs in the future. So, I can give a few examples where, let's say, for the domain that I work in, which is quantum algorithms. The whole effort as of today with the pre-fault tolerant quantum computing technologies is to discover algorithms that can be applied to some use cases and tasks of actual relevance. Now, definitely as a company, we are working towards those kind of applications development, But the end user community, which extensively collaborates with QPI AI, they are the ones that are bringing in novel, algorithms and how it can map to applications that are important in, let's say, life sciences, biochemical simulations, discovery of new materials, etc. So collaboration is very important, and we see that there is a lot of synergy when domain experts come in. They bring in new ways to see quantum that we ourselves cannot see at many times, right? So collaboration becomes very important, and also it becomes important for the long-term sustainability of the technology itself, where new mechanisms of tech development or systems development, or let's say as far as the supply chain is concerned, it can lead to new materials, or it can lead to new ways of building cryogenic systems, etc. So collaboration is important, and I believe that collaboration will lead to new scientific discoveries, and especially interdisciplinary collaboration. And we look forward to any of such collaborations that can come in and actually uh, utilize quantum computing and quantum computers to propel new discoveries or solutions. You're on mute.
Rena, you're muted.
Yes. Thanks, Lakshya. Jessica, what are your thoughts on collaboration? And since you're also playing a role at the ecosystem level, at that level, where do you see the role of collaboration? And which
I
is
think it's obviously really important. The example from JM on like diamonds being great for so many different technologies. You know, the reason that they were first developing diamonds wasn't for quantum. It was because they're ubiquitous across lots of different aspects of engineering. You know, you need them for ultra hard components of drills and blades, much more so than at the moment you need them for quantum technologies. But diamonds also hold huge potential in the future of kind of semiconductor electronics as well. So they're a massively important material where if you really focus on getting the engineering and the fabrication right, all these other technology areas will be lining up at your door to try and buy them. So you do need people who really think deeply about the materials and are able to bridge that kind of language barrier of being a practical engineer and going to speak to a quantum physicist, because there's slightly different jargon that we all use. And everyone needs to be able to come together and realize the potential. But I would say too, there has to be that collaboration with the end users. We have to be able to say to the people in healthcare or the people in space communications or the people in the financial sector or the people in energy, you know, what do you need these technologies to do? Because one of the challenges of quantum is that it's a bunch of very clever physicists who have ideas about what's possible without making something that's useful. So I think actually we need to understand why these technologies are being developed and what they're being developed for. You know, if you take, for example, Quantum for Health, which is a big focus of the UK's quantum program, and I know gaining traction and interest in India as well. And actually, you have to really understand a clinical pathway to know whether your quantum sensor is going to be useful in that clinical pathway. You have to understand why doctors make decisions they make when they do, to know if an enhanced sensitivity or a lower cost or a quicker result is the important thing to be aiming for. So I think it's not just collaboration between academia and industry, although that's really important. It's collaboration between the kind of innovators and the end users, and then connection between all of these different critical techs, you know, AI, semiconductors, engineering, biology. Probably JM can sell diamonds to all of them. So actually it's everyone talking to each other within that space that's really key. And I think one more point to add that we've not really discussed, although I think Lakshya and JM both mentioned it, but is around infrastructure, having kind of accessible open labs where you can go and test out new fabrication, where you might go and take your, you know, physics lab scale demonstrator and make it into something that you can go and actually practically sell or pitch to investors. That's a really key point too. The UK published this quantum infrastructure review in 2023, which was an overview of the UK's quantum infrastructure that basically said, at the moment, we have lots of places where you can go to build and scale a company, but they're pretty inaccessible. No one knows how you should be able to use them. And it's not clear like what the spec is or what the technician time is. So I do think that's important, as well as that kind of open, accessible, easy to navigate infrastructure, so that when you've got innovators like Lakshya, they know where they can go to scale their tech or scale their algorithms or test them.
I think that's a great point, and I think maybe we can bring that question to you, Jayam, on the infrastructure side. What does infrastructure look like for your end of the spectrum on the materials side,
Actually,
and
infrastructure.
how important it is, and what about shared infrastructure? Does that make sense?
So first of all, our main goal of our company was to build the right infrastructure which can produce the right material as per the requirement. So as we have been collaborating with people worldwide, and people have been happy to work on different applications, trying to give their new ideas, and this gives us the new idea to what we can do, how we can resolve this problem, and what we can develop the best. So we have been focusing very much on the infrastructure development. So I think we will have just on the way of developing the first lab in India, which has full-fledged electronics, like a diamond electronics lab for boron doping, phosphorus doping, and controlled NV center doping. So I think it will be the biggest lab right now. And the goal
Biggest in India or biggest in Asia? Biggest
It
where?
can be the biggest in the world because we have
Okay.
planned almost 50 reactors designed only for this. It is
Oh,
a
wonderful.
large scale area so large area for clean room and everything. So all type of facility will be there, and we can do the complete customization on the product development for such materials. Uh, this has been the goal for our company since last 3 years, and right now we built the whole facility from scratch. It has the infrastructure, and it's almost end of the finishing uh, goal of and we are looking for more and more new machines and reactors and equipments and hardwares, which is important for achieving this kind of goals. So yeah.
All right. And Laksha, what does infrastructure look like? I mean, most of the stuff you guys have had to develop yourself, but is there infrastructure that could come in from the government side, or what kind of a shared infrastructure would be of interest to you?
So there have been significant developments in accessibility and availability of infrastructure over quantum communication and quantum sensing domains. Not as much into quantum computing yet, but from our side, what we are doing is we are developing the next scale of infrastructure that can combine quantum and classical computing. And recently, we made an announcement about the QSC, which we are building here in Bengaluru, which aims to integrate a really big distributed classical computing grid into quantum computers, right? And at that layer, we can, position ourselves for a shared digital infrastructure that can be used and is accessible to a lot of organizations and customers that QPI is already working with, but also to other academic and industrial sectors. So my focus at this point is, along with the foundational infrastructure that Jess and Jim has already talked about, how can we make a digital infrastructure which can actually make quantum computers more accessible and can also enhance the adoption for end use case development or discovery.
Okay. Now, since we've talked a little bit about the supply chain from everybody's perspective, where in the quantum supply chain today do you think is the maximum opportunity for innovation? And maybe we can throw in a sovereignty angle also. So it could be colored by sovereign, your concept of, how important it is. So, Jessica, your thoughts?
I mean, it's such a hard question because the interesting thing that this community will know is that there's no kind of agreed on platform for quantum technologies, right? So, whilst everyone uses silicon and semiconductors for kind of microelectronics, actually for quantum, there's still lots of different opportunities, whether it's superconductors or trapped ions or NV diamond. And the world's companies, governments haven't selected what the platform will be. So you can generate and harness these quantum effects in a lot of different materials. So saying, oh, we should go heavy and India should invest massively in the growth of really beautiful superconductors may not be the right answer. The thing that you see is pretty ubiquitous to all of these different technologies is the supporting infrastructure. So things like lasers and optical components, RF and microwave engineering, different vacuum chambers, cryogenics, all of those seem to be pretty ubiquitous to everything. So making sure that actually you can engineer those practically, affordably, at scale, I think is a really strategic and useful thing. Another aspect is that lots of these quantum systems have to be contacted or wired using classical electronics that are at room temperature into systems that are being held at cryogenic temperatures. And just that engineering of trying to bridge a thermal gradient is really complicated. And so knowing what those challenges are, especially the ones where they're common to lots of these different hardware platforms, I think is really sensible. So I don't think there's one where I can say the government should put all their money into JAM's diamond company, because it may not be the platform that's the most scalable. Diamonds have unique strengths that are really good for lots of different parts of sensing. But I think that actually the supporting infrastructure, the optics, the electronics, the RF, the microwave, the cryogenics, they'll be useful to all of these different quantum platforms. Plus, they'll be useful to lots of different technologies beyond quantum. And semiconductors is obviously one of those key underpinning strengths that we all need to, as nations, think about from a sovereign perspective, as geopolitics makes it harder and harder to import semiconductors.
True. I think those are valid points, and I think early on when things started off, at least in India, the race was, the first few startups were very, very focused on either compute or communications or sensing and things like that, right? Or security. And it's only over a period of time that there are more of these startups coming up which are focusing on the core components, let's say lasers and microwaves and other equipments that may be, or cryogenics, which could be key to this. But as compared to the Indian strategy, we've had a look at, for example, the Netherlands ecosystem, which actually started off like that. They were from day one focused on all the core components, and they were the ones, they sort of, consciously took a decision, it looks like, that they will focus on component by component and will become the place which will supply to the rest of the world, where people will, sort of put things together and leverage that. And that's not very different from how things were evolved in the semiconductor side, where ASML, sort of became the entity to provide all the equipment that is needed for these large foundries, which where semiconductor chips are manufactured. So I think this also, sort of reminds me of how there's no unique strategy. I think the strategies can be very varied depending on strategic advantage for different ecosystems. And definitely, today when I look at the Indian ecosystem, I definitely do want to give this message to people who are aspiring to be creating startups, is that they should really look at the component space, because the market opportunity is very high there, right? Like just like Jessica was talking about Jayam being able to supply, Diamond Elements being able to supply to a host different set of, uh, actually different value chains. And similarly, somebody working on lasers could be very critical for the quantum ecosystem, but they could also be actually supporting other ecosystems as well. That sort of that's an interesting analysis that emerged from our discourse. Remember, I talked about information analysis, discourse, and analysis. So, bringing the discourse part back, Lakshya and Jayam, what are your thoughts on the most, for you, what is the most innovative? Where is the biggest scope of innovation in the supply chain?
Should I take it?
Yeah, you can
Go ahead, please.
So certainly a lot, specifically in the context of the technologies that we are building, a lot of potential for innovation into the qubit materials itself, right? And how we can translate the best practices of chip development onto development of superconducting chips. Also into the classical electronics piece itself, where we can leverage talent as well as known methods and tools and technologies to enhance the control systems and the readout systems of the quantum computing infrastructure. A lot of innovation capabilities around fundamentally around algorithms, because they will actually lead us to the end applications. And we see that there can be connections across the most disparate sources of the tech and the application, like how quantum algorithms can be applied to something like route planning, as well as it can be applied to the same technology can be applied to biological gene regulatory networks, right? So that kind of domain transferability uh, gives a big potential for innovation, where techniques from across different domains can be shared and can be enhanced.
What about you, Jay?
Yeah. So regarding this, we have been working on trying to do in various applications of quantum technology. If you say that the highest which can be go into commercialization is the something sensing related. You can develop anything which is related with sensing. It's much more easy to integrate in a chip, and you can deploy in the market faster compared to like quantum computer, which is the most difficult one. You can say that, but still we are working on all of those kind of application in parallel. Like in quantum computer, we are trying to work on developing the wafer for German company, which is QETCI, which is again in collaboration with them. We are developing the diamond materials for their computer, as they are planning to scale from 8 qubit to 16 and further. And the beauty of, as everyone knows, diamond is it removes a lot of the cryogenics part, which was the biggest problem for quantum computers. And we can make more quantum computing at a room temperature. So the goal was to develop some material which can help in achieving such kind of technology or computers in future, where we can make it more easy for installation, integrating, and you can also use it at a chip level, at a small device level or something, which again is very important in terms of commercializing and scaling it up. So this is one what I feel at, but we are right now focusing more on sensing. The same thing we are working in Quantum National Quantum Mission of India. We have already collaborated with the IIT Bombay Group, Kasturi's labs, and our goal was to develop the material whatever they want, and we are moving forward this towards this. And I think the sensing is, I think, is the most easily and more you can easy to integrate and very easy to start working on the final product at this moment. But it doesn't mean that we don't work on the difficult one, but we are working on
Yeah,
parallel.
there are more opportunities, and I
Yes, of
think
course. Yeah.
one of the things that we've been trying to do at QETCI in the last 6 months is we've been advocating and driving more awareness and doing more courses for quantum sensing and for all different stakeholders, right? So we're taking a very holistic approach to it and creating, so that sort of idea is to demystify it for all stakeholders so that there may be more opportunities for people to innovate. People
Right.
who traditionally are not thinking about doing something in this space, right? So that is what we have been doing. And I agree with you that it is easier. It is not easier, but it is, if you have a startup in sensing, you can still think of viability in a shorter time frame as compared to the uncertainty on the compute side in terms of a scalable quantum computer. Although, as you can see from QPI, everybody is making progress on the number of qubits and actual solutions and stuff like that. When we look at,
Can
we
I
talk
can I
about,
just come in on that though? Because
yes, yes, please.
sensing is interesting in that you're right. Its return on investment will happen quicker because the investment is much smaller than compute, and they're much closer to commercial realities. In some cases, they are commercial realities, but they will never return the amount of investment that VCs want to see. So VCs want to see kind of 100x plus investment and return on their investment. And so sensing companies, because VC investors are so focused on quantum computing, and there's a huge amount of FOMO, right? So they want to invest in companies because they're worried that other people aren't investing in them and they might miss out. And I think sensing gets left out of the investment narrative a lot because it won't return that much, anywhere near as much as computing. It will return on investment, but it won't be as large a return as compute. And they just struggle to get the attention of investors because it's not got computing in the title. So even though, yeah, I completely agree with Jayan that sensing is really cool, much nearer term, there's still really big challenges, less so from materials or infrastructure, but more so from a lack of investment.
Yes,
So I would think that the Indian market is a bit different. And I think we initially had the challenge of, so it's a high investment in computing is high risk, high gain. And we've seen this, when there is promise. We've had like Cuba AI themselves, closed a round which was at par with the rest of the world, right? And despite the fact that your expenses are lower in India, right? At least the manpower, this thing. And of course,
human power.
Human power. Yeah. Sorry.
Human
Yeah. I should never be, I sort of implied everybody. Yeah. So, so once we look at, once we look at this context of how investment is happening in India, initially there are people who will do high risk, high gain, but there's a lot of people who will want to do, okay, this is going to give me returns in the shorter term. So I don't necessarily see that problem for early stage and mid stage startups, but when it comes to large scale expansion, I don't know what it's going to look like. So, in fact, we are planning an event in Q2, which is focused on investors and startups in India. They are now, I looked at the list which which we created recently, and it's crossed 90. There are 90 plus startups in India right now, as of today.
That's
And
really cool.
yeah. So our last count few months ago was 60. That number is already 90. So a lot of interest and enthusiasm in the ecosystem. So we're going to do this event in Q2, and that should give us some insights into how this thing is looking for sensing versus computing versus communications and so on. So, but I totally get what you're saying from an international market perspective. All the noise is about the quantum computing startups, and that's very true. Yes, Lakshya?
Yeah, so as you said, quantum computing versus communication versus sensing, I do believe that as far as the technology is concerned and how it scales up and how it improves, I do see a convergence of many of these technologies in the way they either at the component or the supply chain level as well as onto the end user level. Right, I do see that futuristic technologies may have a convergence of these different domains. Like for example, quantum sensors and the kind of data that they generate, they can. There is a potential that this data can be effectively analyzed by quantum computers directly. So that is one possibility. Or we see that today's telecommunication networks and how well they are connected to data centers. There could be a possibility of how we can have integrated networks, and that could also include distributed quantum computing as the computational layer. So there is a lot of synergy as well, and potentially I see that there is a convergence of how these different technologies will merge ahead and create a bigger value.
That's a valid point. I also see a lot of convergence in terms of, let's say if somebody's working on a quantum memory, and once you make the first few breakthroughs, then this technology could branch off to support both the networks as well as compute based on the requirements, right? And so I think there are a lot of dependencies like that as well. Yeah.
Also, I would like to add another way of sensing, which is we have been working on it. This like gyroscope, quantum-based gyroscopes. Again, it's very important for a lot of applications. From your mobile handheld device to defense level, you can scale it up to anything. So depends on the sensing requirement. So we are currently working on investing in this kind of field where we develop a quantum NV-based gyroscope, which is for from commercial level to defense level. This is our target, and this is a big market because all your uh, flying aircrafts, or space or defense, everyone needs a drones or anyone will need a gyroscope to which is an alternative to the GPS. And this is a product which we are focusing on, which is again bigger than just a normal sensor, what we are working on.
Yeah.
And this is very promising. As a private company, we have been funding it, so we don't care about the VCs. So we are itself we are doing it, and our goal is to make the product as successful in next 2 3 years. And we are focusing on this kind of products, which is going to be very important product for future generation, for future technology, and it is going to be change the whole.
So I was not aware that you guys
It
are
would
working
make
on
it. It will be a
GPS-free
disruption.
navigation, and there
Yeah.
are different technologies that focus on that. But it's good to see some diamond-based, NV center-based technologies also for getting focus, getting focus on that front.
Yes,
What
very
you
easy.
said, Jam, raises up another interesting point to me. You talked
Yeah.
about defense, GPS-free navigation, and hence defense kind of applications. And I guess the question then is, what is the kind of role that in a country, what is the role that the defense can play, or what is the role that they do play in this definition of sovereignty, right? And driving sovereignty in a certain manner.
Yeah, because it is going to make a lot of difference where if current technology which is used is based on GPS, and there is another technology which is working on NV, which gyroscope, and of course everyone would like to have this integrated in their defense equipments because it has higher sensitivity, it has higher reliability, it can work in places where the current GPS are failing, which and that makes it very unique position where every country would like to have this kind of
Sure,
sovereignty this
sure.
way. But
Jessica, on a
but
wider scale, what is the role that defense can play for driving
initially it
tech
can show.
sovereignty discussions or conversations?
So why defense? Because it's a high. If you just talk about money, where you want to get the funding or something, this is a very easy to get funding if you show the technology prototype.
I thanks, Jem. I had asked Jessica, are you guys
Oh,
able to hear me clearly?
Yeah. Sorry, I
Yes.
also thought you'd asked James, so I think we
even
both
I thought
decided not
it's
to.
you're
Okay,
asking.
so
But I think the defense angle is interesting. Obviously they're investing massively across different technologies, sensing, computing, particularly the navigation systems Cheyenne was mentioning. I think it's quite a kind of been practiced in history that defense are often the first customer. I mean, they've got by far the deepest pockets. If you look at lots of America's quantum program, it's almost entirely funded by DARPA and now the Department of War.
Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of pretty typical in a tech development. When there's a big ticket thing, defense will pour money in, get it to a point that it's commercially prosperable, makes money, and then defense will be a customer because they'll have made that technology possible and then be able to buy them at scale. So when you look at quantum sensors for defense or quantum computers for defense, there's a huge amount of investment. It raises kind of ethical implications too. There are some researchers who just will not work with defense companies. And that I'm not sure how we can think about that from a kind of tech progress perspective. It comes back to that sovereignty question, I suppose. I think at the moment we're so desperate in the scientific community for kind of guidance on who our trusted international partners are. And at the moment you see a really big race in quantum to say, we need to be doing this because the bad guys are doing this. So we have to be doing this without really defining who those bad guys are. And that it doesn't sit entirely well with me. There's this dilemma in tech development, which is kind of how do you regulate a technology where the impacts of the technology have not been defined yet? So we don't know what quantum sensors and computers will be used for in defense. So how do we start to regulate the types of application? But the flip side of that is once a technology is so widely embedded, it's very hard to regulate. And I think you're seeing this with AI, that before AI became so kind of ubiquitous, no one was really sure how you'd regulate it because we didn't know where it would end up. And now it's being used by all of these police forces to try and identify criminals or whatever. Everyone's saying, whoa, we need to regulate it. So, of course, defense plays a role, investing massively, making lots of these technologies possible. But the kind of ethical implications of where these technologies may one day be used in a battlefield can kind of give you pause as a researcher who wants to develop tech for good.
Yeah, so I think while we discuss tech sovereignty, a very important point that you brought up, Jessica, is that the more sovereignty there is, that is what the implication I'm getting, once I'm listening to this is the more sovereignty there is and the less collaboration there is, the more the opportunity, the lesser the opportunity for standardizing or regulating. Because if some technology is fully sovereign within a nation, where is the will for regulating it going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, there is a pathway. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I post it to my engineering students. Of course, many of them don't ever think about ethics. But actually, in nuclear, we do have a guiding framework where countries have to declare their nuclear assets and talk to each other about them. And in that whole notion of it, you build trust and you say, okay, we are doing this. It's probably for defense, but we'll come clean and say what we have. And I think we'll have to get to that kind of framework for quantum as well, where you trust people because they're very open about what they're working on. And at the moment in quantum, there's a lot of closed doors where people are nowhere near as open as they should be.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's another place where India could take real leadership. I mean, you just had that AI Impact Summit, which is probably the biggest grouping ever of people thinking about the implications of AI. I think from everything I've heard, it was a wild success in Delhi. Despite so many people, everything worked and everyone came away from it very inspired. And I think that kind of leadership is probably needed in quantum as well.
True. I totally agree with you on that. And yeah. Any thoughts on these topics, Lakshya? Either on the this use of the role of defense or topics around responsible quantum, ethical quantum?
So I have been seeing a few frameworks that are coming for responsible and ethical use of quantum technologies over the last 2.5 years. But I would say we have a long way to go as the impact of technology becomes more pronounced and more visible. We definitely need a guiding framework to position these technologies and their use. On the regulatory part, definitely uh, collaboration is needed to build regulations and standards, and the way these different technologies and I would say the different backbones in the ecosystems can interact with each other. So I say we have made some progress, but we have a long way to go.
Right. In fact, just for the sake of information, QETCI is right now working with CSIRO in Australia and with ISP in India. We are creating a framework for responsible quantum in the APAC region. And we do intend to, actually, while we are interviewing stakeholders within these two geographies, we intend to actually make presentations to stakeholders in other geographies. I know I had a conversation with Jonathan on presenting to the responsible quantum working group as part of the UK and possibly Japan as well, so that we can sort of get a more broader perspective on these things. So these are early. We also realize that these are very early times, right? And this conversation is starting, and we are trying to create something at a time where all the possible uses for the technology are still evolving, right, as we move forward. So yeah.
Can I come in with one thing? Because Rena, what you were saying also, and I think that JM mentioned it as well, around kind of standards, that's really important. And I think being involved as a voice in that call for standards, it will be impossible to scale any of these quantum hardwares or algorithms unless there are really clearly defined standards. I mean, that made the solar industry possible. That made so much of semiconductors possible. I know those standards committees are increasingly dominated by people from certain countries who often sway the way that those standards go. And my friend thinks a lot about semiconductor standards and says it's quite surprising because some countries put so much investment and time into defining global standards. Some countries, UK included, don't think it's that important and send very few people to those types of meetings. There's this grouping called NMIQ, which probably you've heard of, probably everyone here has heard of, but it's the kind of National Metrology Institute's kind of quantum focus. I don't think India are in NMIQ yet. So it's kind of 7 nations defining metrology and kind of future of quantum standards. But to ensure the kind of Indian voice is still really central to that conversation, I think being involved with that type of thing is really important.
Totally agree with you on that. And I think this is the other thing that we've been advocating, that there should be more involvement, not just in this. Anybody who wants to work on products which are going to be global has to have a say in standards, right? And that should happen at the country level. And very similar to UK, India also we have participation in standards, but nowhere near the countries that you've mentioned who have been investing heavily in getting their voice heard in standards, right? They'll have more than one person most of the time, and there is a lot of consistency in.
Well, I think in those in certain certain countries, there's a financial incentive for people to be involved. So there's a literal cash incentive for academics and industry people to contribute to the development of standards, and that means people want to do it. The UK has never, and I don't think would ever, do something like that. So there's the different incentive mechanisms is quite alarming and something we should probably be thinking about.
Yeah. Their focus has to be brought in whatever way which is ethical and possible. Yeah. All right, we are at 5 p.m. and I know that the audience has already been writing a few things on the chat window. So I'm going to open it up briefly for audience questions, and if there are enough questions, then we'll continue just with the questions. So please raise your hand if you want to ask a question to any of the panelists or to all of the panelists, and I'll let you ask the question. I think there are a lot of comments here. I don't know if there's a question in the write-up here. Any questions?
There's a good question about semiconductors, which I think is really important. So the kind of leverage in India's semiconductor mission infrastructure. I can comment just on the UK side that we have a semiconductor strategy. We have a semiconductor team inside government, and there's not enough collaboration with the quantum team. So often semiconductor people sit separately to quantum people, who sit separately to AI people, who sit separately to engineering biology people, but everyone uses semiconductors. So I think this point from Anuj about the need to really think about integrating the semiconductor mission and the skills and the hardware and the infrastructure into the quantum program would be really fantastic for India, just as it would be if the UK would recognize that as well.
So one of the things absolutely, and one of the things that we've been working on as an ecosystem enabling entity is that we came up with the quantum value chain framework, and we identified allied sectors. And one of the first recommendations we gave to the government was that for all the allied sectors, there has to be cross strategy. There has to be a cross strategy. And one of the things that is happening on the Indian semiconductor mission side is that the chair of the National Quantum Mission governing board, Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, is also an advisor to the National Semiconductor Mission. So that synergy is being brought in. I think people have become aware that these are allied sectors and dependencies are very high. And the same thing had been happening for some time on the photonics and the electronic component manufacturing side as well. I don't think so. The intent is there, and efforts are happening. There have been some advantages of some results out of this on the photonics and the electronics side, but we have to see what happens on the semiconductor side, and definitely a lot more synergy can happen for sure. That's my update from the India side on that. And Anuj, in many cases, even now for quantum as well, many of the labs, they actually provide services to people on a paid basis. They give access to the infrastructure. Many people are not aware about that. That's because it's not largely publicized in that manner. But when people reach out to us, we do connect them. Yes, Jayam.
Yeah, just answering the Anuj's requirement that we are already leveraging trying to work on with the Semiconductor Mission of India, as well as the Gujarat Semiconductor Mission from our state level. So we are trying to put diamond electronics and adding quantum chip manufacturing fabrication in that also. So we are trying to work with government and trying to show that we are doing something which is different and is aligned
That is
with
more
the
driven by the
semiconductor
industry. Yeah.
mission. Yes.
Yeah. And I think you guys may be doing something similar, Lakshya.
Oh, yes, certainly. The National Quantum Mission and has a overlapping and synergistic roadmap with this semiconductor mission. Looking beyond that, we also have the National Supercomputing Mission, right, where the end users of quantum computers would be sitting into high performance computing and supercomputing data centers. So I would say there is a lot of complementary skill set that are being utilized across these different missions by the relevant departments and the ministries to channelize the learnings as well as the future roadmaps for development of the technology. And from the let's say for students and the research scholars, they are equally equipped who are participating in the semiconductor technology development. They're also equally equipped to contribute towards various aspects of quantum communication or quantum computing, right? So I do believe that there is a broader ecosystem from all of these national priorities: biotech, space technology, superconductor semiconductors, and quantum, as well as supercomputing. And there is a lot of exchange and cross utilization of resources and ideas. Still, I would say that this is several of these missions have just started over the past few years. So we'll see a lot of amalgamation and unified ways of how these separate missions would amalgamate.
Okay, great. Any other
I wonder if
questions?
one
Yeah.
more thing, there's something in the messaging. I've been thinking about it from a UK perspective, but even more so from being in India this week, about how strong your ecosystem is for tech development and how much opportunity there is for infrastructure, for engineering, how much state support. If you look at the distribution of quantum funding, it's pretty regionally diverse across India, which probably wouldn't be true in most other countries where it would be kind of localized. In the UK, it's often localized in the southeast, or in America, it's localized either side of the, on the east and west rather than being in the middle. So I wonder, oh gosh, we've lost our host. I'll keep talking to the audience. I'm presuming Rena will come back in a minute.
Only his video is off, I guess.
Okay, Rena's still there. Okay, so I think there's something in making the case on a global stage for how strong India's quantum program is, and how diverse and how supportive it is to innovators within that program. I think it would help to attract international talent, and help to keep investors, and also just help to maintain momentum and enthusiasm. In the UK, I know the government has changed visa requirements. So if you are someone who's here on a global talent visa for quantum, the amount of time you have to stay in the UK before getting indefinite leave to remain is only 3 years rather than 10 years, which is really huge because it's saying we want to attract quantum talent here and keep quantum talent here, and the government support and the flexibility, blah, blah, blah. So I do think there's something on an international stage where India could say, we've got all of this going on, all of this potential. It's an amazing place to come and build your quantum company as well.
Yeah, that is there. I think there is a lot of encouragement of people to come and build. But traditionally, the question that I remember I asked you, Jess, was that would somebody from UK want to come and do that? Traditionally, we get a lot of people who are NRIs or people from India who have gone abroad. They want to come back and set up a company here when all these incentives are given. But would somebody from UK or Europe or US want to come back and do that? Come and do that? Somebody who's not of Indian origin?
I think that at the moment, no one knows what the opportunities are. So you don't know what the opportunity is in infrastructure, in lab space, or in materials. Like you said, it was chance that Jayan was at Imperial and found this new customer for diamonds when they've been looking for a diamond supplier of the quality they need for so long. So there's almost this kind of need to go out internationally and be the person who can do that kind of sales pitch. I'm not saying India's not good at it and the UK are good at it, because I think the UK aren't good at it. But I do think that there is that kind of need at the moment to say, this is what you could, if I go to quite a few things in the States, and when you hear people from Colorado or from Boston or from Chicago talking about their quantum ecosystem, you think, gosh, that sounds so amazing, like sign me up. And I don't think we have that from India coming to say, this is what you could get. So I think there's almost a need for like a bit of PR and marketing. If you sell products to the Indian market, it's the biggest market in the world. So why wouldn't you want to do that?
True. We are, a lot of companies are setting up, and I think you're right. I don't think there's enough. I wouldn't call it marketing, but I think just for me, there are so many gaps of understanding, and there is so much information overload that unless things happen, opportunities are created for people to get together, like that visit that we did to UK with a group of people, or when we started off doing a quantum value chain mapping for one and a country in Europe. At the time when we started the value chain mapping, there was very little awareness among researchers on both sides so this was not a natural collaboration that was happening. But by the time we finished the mapping and once several roundtables had happened, there were already conversations ongoing on what opportunities were going to emerge. So I think just by bringing people together and making them aware can have huge impact. And as an ecosystem entity, we do see that. And I think the organization that you are on the board of is also trying to do the same, right? So that's something that makes a lot of sense. Any other questions? I know Jessica has to leave in another 10 minutes. So any questions for Jessica or for any of the other panelists? To all of us.
There are some great comments in the chat, but you're right. They're basically people giving their own good, useful insights, like they should be on the panel, not us. Maybe
it's
the first question
we already discussion, right? I mean, it's
yeah, it's really great. The first question, and it's really mature points. They're really good. The first question is around what's the first step for ensuring sovereignty in a supply chain? And probably my answer, and Jayam and Lakshya will have something better to say, but would be you have to really understand the supply chain. And I think we don't really understand the complexities of the supply chain at the moment, because you could buy all your lasers from Denmark, but actually find out they're made in Japan and then sold to Denmark. So I think that understanding the nuances of different hardware having very different, very, very complicated supply chains, and then defining that own collaborate access framework is really key.
True. So for example, I always, when we think of supply chains and OEM, the play of OEMs, right? One of the things that really, in perfect example, earlier, at least a decade ago in India, if you picked up any air conditioner, right? It would be some brand and then the compressor would be Hitachi. And once I noticed it, I actually started digging into it just to see, what it was. And every single compressor was Hitachi, right? So you were buying all these Indian brands, and then when you looked at, and then Hitachi was selling its own ACs, right? And then I used to work in storage networking before I jumped into quantum. And if you look at any of the NAS devices or the large storage boxes, storage area network, which were part of that, if you start looking at the OEM B2B scenarios, many of them were pointing to the same companies, right? So there would be a box which would actually come from one company. I don't want to get into the names here right now. And it would get rebranded as an HP box or an IBM box. And at the back end, there would be some other hardware, which would be the common denominator for the entire value chain, right? So I think there are a lot of these aspects that become very, very relevant as well. Yeah. Any other questions? We lost one of our panelists, Lakshya.
Lakshya's back.
Join back.
Okay, so we just need to pin you again. In the meantime, if there are any questions, please raise your hands.
Question from Isha about Indian ecosystem facing the issue of talent leak.
Why don't you go ahead, Isha, and ask the question? Unmute yourself and you can ask.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfectly.
Hi, everyone. First, the panelists, thanks for a great discussion. Really interesting. Yeah, so this is really following up on the discussion, the previous discussion between Jess and Reena. So I was wondering if we are facing this opposite challenge of a talent leak outside of India. So where the quantum experts in India find better opportunities outside of India and leave. And then maybe they decide to stay there, perhaps because of the 3-year a visa deal that the UK offers or something else. And if that is the case, I was wondering, how does the Indian ecosystem plan to mitigate that?
Okay, so maybe I can answer that question. While so this is cannot be viewed as an official Indian government because I represent a entity which is a private entity. But in my conversations with people, I don't think we are really bothered about talent. If talent goes to other countries and works there, we are, and this is most of the time for whatever Jessica is talking about, is people mostly in the early stages of their career, right? They want to start and they want to then start look for visa opportunities, and they would go to and there is scope for people to go to work in India, to go to other countries and work and so on. And we have a huge set of talented people in India. The brain drain problem is a little bit more intense if you have established researchers or established companies that try to move out from our geography to another geography. That is a bigger cause of concern. And that is where there are efforts to, sort of invest in those startups and the kind of support that the government has been giving. And you heard some of that from Lakshya and Jayam. I mean, the fact that they're talking so often about in their conversations about the National Quantum Mission and the kind of opportunities and the kind of direction that is coming in, that is exactly to prevent good companies or any companies that are planning to grow in this space to be leaving the country. That is a bigger problem, and that is a bigger focus that is there. And also the people. Yes, Jayam, please go ahead.
So for the Isha's question regarding this, how brain drain will happen, but people here, they just want the right infrastructure. If you have the right infrastructure available here, people are not ready to go outside. If you deliver the right facility and you give them the freedom to develop the product, you don't see this. And we have already done reverse. We have already retrieved a lot of people from around the world who wants to come back in last 3 years and work on quantum technology. So because we have the good infrastructure in our facility, and they want to see that, they want to work here, because they don't get to such kind of facility even abroad what we have it here. So they want to come back. They are working here since last 3-4 years. We have 3 scientists already joined us, and we are already in talk with many more from different parts of the world.
So that perhaps maybe answers partly a follow-up question that I had, because when I asked this question, what I had in mind was more of postdoctoral talent. So really postdocs are in between, where they're still not made permanent in academia, but still they're senior researchers. And then this is the time where they might decide to leave India, even though they've stayed in India, done their PhD and maybe early postdocs here.
So I will tell you, one of our is already 5 years postdoc from Taiwan and Europe, and he came back.
So, I met an amazing guy in IIT Bombay, Dinesh. I don't know if you know Professor Dinesh Kabra. He's like a world leader in optoelectronics, and he was in Cambridge for, I don't know, 5-10 years. And in the most well-connected Nobel laureate leading group, whatever, you name it. And he came back because he recognizes the potential of it, the promise, the actuality of India's ecosystem. So I think maybe that's also around the messaging, the conversation with Reena. Postdocs will always want to travel internationally. In the UK, they want to travel internationally. But where you choose to set up your company and make home, I think that reflects a lot the support you get. Like Jayam mentioned, infrastructure is one part of it, kind of financial incentives, skilled workers, access to people who don't cost $150,000 that's actually really powerful on convincing people. And also, I think, when I speak to people in the UK now, do they want to go to America as much as they did a year ago? No. So I actually think the kind of changing geopolitics of it is making places that once were really attractive much, much less attractive.
Yes, that's true. I think a lot of changes are happening in that perspective as well, right?
Thank you.
To add a point
Thanks.
on this is that the industry has started to absorb a lot of this postdoctoral talent. Unlike the case maybe a few years ago or a few decades ago, a lot of highly skilled research talent is now being absorbed in the industry and actively contributing to the development of the industry. So we have seen a lot of people coming back and then joining here and continue to work here. So I see this as an indication that there is a shift that is going on.
Thanks. Perhaps I should also add, I'm one of those people. I was a postdoc most of my academic life outside of India, and now I'm back and hoping to enter this ecosystem. So I'm glad that, Reena, I was actually looking forward to, in fact, your opinion also on this, to get a better idea of the overall ecosystem. So I'm glad that this is a generic opinion. There's consensus on this. So thank
Yes,
you.
I
please.
wonder if when you're in the ecosystem, Isha, when you get a job or whatever it is, to start kind of talking about it, to do, I don't know where the best platform is. It might be on LinkedIn or something like that. But I think that kind of storytelling, like I was there, I've come here, and now I'm working in this really exciting sector. We had a PhD student from Imperial who went to work in Germany because of the promise of opportunity, infrastructure, constant financial security for research. And said it was awful because you felt just like a tiny cog in a massive machine where you didn't really know why the machine was working or who the people with power was. Whereas in the UK, it's smaller, it's support, it's got less money in it, but you're part of something bigger. You know what your role is. You know how the kind of pathways to move to the positions you want. And that's really important early in your career. So I wonder if there's a bit of storytelling you can do that's like, I had this and this is why I've come back. And then that kind of has a multiplier effect.
Thanks for the tip. Yes, I'll utilize that.
Yes, that will be very useful for the ecosystem as well. Yeah. Thank you. Any last question from the audience? So I'm going to take this opportunity to give back everybody 10 minutes. And it was a great discussion. So thank you to my fellow panelists. I had a great time having this discussion with you. Thank you to the audience. I could see that we had a very engaged audience with the kind of comments and questions that were there. And until next month, see you then. Everybody have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.